everyone, welcome to Weekly Reminders, Episode 3. I'm Sarah, I'm your host for today, and I'm the Program Manager at Remind. So thank you for joining us today. If you haven't watched our other episodes of our Weekly Reminders, feel free to go ahead and do that after you watch today. We started off our series with self-care, which is a very important topic right now. And our next video went into navigating anxiety, which also we are all experiencing currently. And so I really recommend you going back and watching those if you haven't seen them. Today, I am going to talk about a really relevant topic, grief. Grief amid COVID-19. Now, this is something that you turn on the news, you see. Even if you don't turn on the news, you might be experiencing your own sense of loss in multiple ways. And it might be something that you potentially haven't been thinking about because you might think, well, I don't actually know anybody that I've lost from COVID-19. And I really hope that you haven't, and I hope that your families and you are safe. But in the event that this isn't something that's happened to you, there's a sense of grief and things that we're all grieving today. And so I wanted to talk about this topic. There's a lot of people that are talking about this right now on the news media, on the internet, maybe just talking about it with families. It's a really relevant topic, and I think maybe we can gain some insight into the reactions that we're currently experiencing today if we talk about this topic. And spoiler alert, this isn't something that people really want to talk about, right? It's not a fun topic. I understand that people might be thinking, this is a tough situation enough. Why are we going to talk about this? But it's important to acknowledge, and we know that it is a very difficult time right now. And by talking about it, it might help us have an understanding of what's going on for us and the people around us that we love. So let's get into the topic today. Now, I did read an article from Dr. Weiss from psychologytoday.com that inspired a lot of this talk. And psychologytoday.com is a great website to utilize if you are in need of a mental health clinician in your area. And I really suggest that you check it out if you haven't heard about it. And you can go on there and search for mental health clinicians that are nearby you. And a lot of these clinicians do telehealth. So if you're in need of a therapist right now to talk about any of the mental health challenges you might be experiencing, you can utilize that website to find somebody local to you. So they also have some great articles that they post on there related to mental health topics. And I encourage you to go on and check it out. This particular article by Dr. Weiss was specific to talking about grief during COVID-19. And I think the important thing here is that he talked about this experience that we're having as a shared sense of loss as a society. And this is a really important time in history, because this is something that it's not just one person or one family that's experiencing this. It's literally the entire world is experiencing a sense of loss. And so today we are all grieving. Yesterday we were grieving. Tomorrow we're going to be grieving. We're grieving for a variety of reasons. We're grieving because of the loss of human lives, the loss of our freedoms, the loss of a predictable future. We are grieving expectations that we had for our future. It's very uncertain about when we will be able to get back to normal life. A lot of people had things planned. Besides just getting up and living our normal lives, there's people that had weddings planned. There's people that had events planned in their life, graduation, things that were really important to them that they had this expectation that they were going to be able to have, and in a certain way. I know I have a few friends that I know that are expecting children right now. They're pregnant and they're going to be having babies during this time. And it's very difficult for people to stay excited and to really be able to be in the joy of these moments when there's all this anxiety going around and they're having the loss of what they thought their reality was going to be like when they had this special time in their lives. So it's really grief from the lives and the rules that we really left behind, rushing indoors to get away from the virus and to stay safe. It hit us hard, it hit us fast, and it hit us unexpectedly, as grief often does. And I think the thing that's really difficult as well is that it repeats every single day. We wake up and we know there's going to be more lives lost. We wake up and we don't know when the end of it is. And there's more things that we are grieving the loss for. And it's important to kind of understand that, our individual reactions to grief at any time are going to differ. And so talking about it today might be able to help you understand how you are grieving individually, maybe help you kind of understand maybe why you're feeling certain things or doing certain things, and as well as kind of setting us a framework for what we're going through as a community who are experiencing this shared sense of loss in a communal way. And so Dr. Weiss in this article pointed out that we can utilize the 5 stages of grief from Dr. Kubler-Ross. And I'm sure everybody has heard of these stages of grief. They are something that a lot of people have heard in their everyday lives, and it's something that people often refer to when they talk about grief. And Dr. Kubler-Ross was really one of the first clinicians who provided us an insight and talked about how people grieve and why they grieve and that universal human experience of grief. And the thing that she really did that was really instrumental and important in her work was, first of all, talk about grief, talk about the grief experience, because people, like I said in the beginning of the video, do not want to talk about it. This is not something people want to talk about. They don't want to study about it. They don't want to write with it. They don't want to write about it. They want to pretend that grief and death and loss, it's just something that doesn't happen. Or, if you talk about it more, then it's going to happen more. There's all these really negative ideas that we have about death and loss and grief in our society. So it was really instrumental for her to first put language around what grief looks like for humans and the experience. And what a lot of people don't know about her work, which I found very interesting, is that her work actually, it didn't pertain to the grief that we experience for other people, which is what we usually think about it for. We think about the stages of anger and denial, bargaining, when we're trying to process the grief of somebody else. But her work actually stemmed from individuals who were grieving their own life because they were in hospice, they had terminal cancer. And the thing that really resonates here is that in this experience right now, the majority of us are grieving things in our own life. Of course, there's things that we're grieving for others outside of it, but there's a lot of grief and loss in our own life currently. And so these stages might be more applicable right now because we're experiencing a lot of loss in our life, even though, like I said earlier, we may not be aware of it. The thing that is important to remember about these 5 stages is that they're not necessarily fixed. Like, you are not going to necessarily go through all 5 of the stages if you're experiencing grief and loss. You might experience some of them, maybe not others. There's not necessarily an order that you have to go through these stages in order. It doesn't really happen like that. Some people think that that's what these stages are for, but really it's just to put in perspective things that you could experience. And so keep that in mind when we talk about these different stages. So I'm going to go through them, the 5 stages: denial, anger, bargaining, despair, depression, and acceptance. And I'm going to talk about how they look today, what some of the examples of what they're looking like for us right now. And so let's just jump right in. If you have any questions, feel free to post a comment while I'm speaking, or later if you'd like to post a comment, I can definitely, we can answer any questions that you might have afterwards. And so let's start talking about denial. This tends to be one of the first stages that people experience when they're experiencing loss. And denial really helps us to minimize the shock that we're experiencing, the overwhelming pain and loss. And it kind of gives us a chance to understand what's happening, make sense of what's happening. So some of the examples of what denial might look like right now is people saying things like, this whole thing is so overblown, or, it's the same as the flu. People get the flu every year, hardly no one dies. Or even, hey, I'm not older, I'm not immunocompromised, so I'll be fine. That might be what denial looks like currently. So moving on to anger. Anger is the next stage. Anger is really an empowering emotion, and it kind of helps us to kind of attempt to gain control over the experience that we're having emotionally. But we tend to blame other people. In this stage, we will often act out against the rules, do things that maybe are outside of our character. And so what does anger look like for us right now? These are some of the things that Dr. Weiss references in his article. He says people might be saying things like, this is all China's fault. If they'd have quarantined earlier, we wouldn't be having this problem. Or maybe blaming other political officials for the way things are currently. Some people might also be saying, you know what, I don't care what the governor says. I'm going to go out and I'm going to see my friends. I can do what I want. I don't care what people say. So that might be what anger looks like currently. The next stage is bargaining. So bargaining starts happening when denial starts to break down a bit and we start to acknowledge that the reality of what's happening, but we're not really ready to give up the illusion that we still have some control. So basically what we're trying to do here is compromise to find an easier, less painful way out. And so some of the things that people might be saying if they're bargaining. So they might say it's okay to spend time with others if they wash their hands before they see me. A lot of these bargaining statements are an if-then, if-so situation. Some other types of bargaining might be, you know what, this is all going to be over by Easter. If I'm safe until then everything will be okay. Another one could be something like, you know what, I know when people look sick, as long as I stay around only healthy people, I'll be fine. That could be an example of bargaining. And so moving on, the next stage is, some people call it despair, some people call it depression. It's important if you are calling it depression just to realize that it's not a mental health diagnosis depression. It's the feeling of depression, of hopelessness, of negative downward spiral, of thinking, but it's not something that is going to need treatment from a mental health provider. It's just this particular stage in the grief experience, and I think we can all relate to it if there's something that we have experienced loss in our life before. So what does it look like right now? I know there is a lot of kind of despair and thoughts of hopelessness and the uncertainty, I think, of the time of our grief and how long this is going to last, and kind of understanding what more am I going to grieve really plays into us kind of being maybe stuck a little bit more in this stage. And so what this looks like is I can't go to work, I can't earn money, pretty soon I'm going to be broke, I'm going to be homeless, and you just kind of spiral into those thoughts. Another kind of despairing thought would be, this epidemic is the new normal, I can kind of give up on all my hopes and dreams about the way things were before. And so that might be some examples of what despair currently looks like. The next and final stage of grief is acceptance. Now, acceptance doesn't mean that you're okay with the experience necessarily. It just means that you're really adjusting to the new reality of how things are. And so, examples of what acceptance might look like right now. So, I can't control the pandemic, but there are things that I can do. I can stay home. I can wash my hands. I can try to be positive. Maybe another example might look something like, the fact that I can't leave my house doesn't mean that my life has to stop. So I can still work. I can still connect with friends and family over the internet or over phone, FaceTime, maybe not close. Social distancing is, putting limits on that, but there's still ways that we can connect with people. And then maybe also, hey, I can enjoy the extra time with being at home with myself, with my family, with my pets, whatever it is that you might be able to enjoy. I know some of my friends that have kids are having a little bit of a harder time enjoying being home with the added stress. But it is something to consider when we're thinking about acceptance of the new current reality. And so those are the 5 stages of grief. So if you hear yourself in those, or maybe think about, maybe there are some things or some emotions that I've been feeling that I realize I've been angry lately, and I haven't really put my finger on it. And one of the things that Dr. Weiss talks about that's really important that a lot of us are experiencing right now is role loss. And so the loss of the roles that we had before. So what does that mean? We could be grieving not being able to be a helpful coworker, maybe not being able to help support the new hire, not being able to have the work birthday party. We're really grieving our roles and the things that we used to do, and maybe now we're doing them in a different way, but it's still really impacting us. And some of those roles for a lot of people have been taken away with the amount of people that have lost their jobs and no longer have those roles. And so we're really grieving our lives that we knew that were normal before, the lives that we had before, our routines. I know there's some things in my routine that I'm not grieving, like I'm not grieving having to drive through Houston traffic. I definitely don't miss that every day on my way to work. So those are some things that when I'm in the acceptance stage and I'm feeling that at a certain time, I think about that. That's something that's a bonus to me. But realistically, it's all hard and it's all grief. And the important thing to think about when we're talking about grief is it's normal. And to understand that what you're feeling is normal, and we're all going through it. Like I said in the beginning, it is a shared sense of grief in the community, something that we haven't seen in our lifetimes. And so I want to give you the permission, if you haven't given it to yourself, allow yourself some anger, allow yourself some denial, some bargaining, some despair. Go ahead and grieve. You have earned it. We have all earned it. And it's okay. Remember, it's temporary. It might not feel that it's temporary, but it is. Emotions are temporary, situations are temporary. But that doesn't take away from the fact that this is what we're all experiencing, and it's okay. So that's all I have for you today on the topic of grief amid COVID-19. Please feel free to comment. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. I really appreciate you tuning in today for our weekly reminders, episode 3. Like I said, if you haven't watched those other 2 episodes that we've already done, please go ahead and do that. You can follow us here on Facebook or LinkedIn, also Instagram and Twitter. If you would like to visit our website for more information about mental health topics or resources, please do. It's remindsupport.org. Again, remindsupport.org. And stay tuned for more of our weekly reminders. I'm going to be back again next week. We're going to switch to a different day and time. So next week I will be presenting on April 14th, which is a Tuesday. I'm going to be coming to you at 7 p.m. in the evening. And our topic for next week is going to be addressing children's anxiety from COVID-19. So that's all I have for today. Thanks for tuning in, and stay safe.